I got the whole fucking thing on video, bitch.
8 days into my personal little project of 90 days called This Much Is True. It's a podcast largely for my own amusement and nobody else's by the looks of things. And it's here on YouTube. But I've got to look into just tightening the whole thing up on audio and putting it out on traditional platforms like Podomatic, Spotify, Podbean, any of those. It's a weird kind of day I had today. I wasn't feeling great. In fact, it was a day I felt I could have really gone back to bed. And I did for a few hours around 6 o'clock. But I had a lot on in terms of recording, editing, etc. What are my subjects for today? I've barely thought of them, but one is the most beautiful thing I ever beheld. The most beautiful thing I ever saw. And I'm talking about artistically. Yeah. And also a little bit about dyslexia. Dyslexia rules. KO. Get it? And finally, kind of well-known or famous people that I have encountered. How about that? Meanwhile, you can check out some of the older episodes if you want, because there's lots of subjects in there. Did anyone look at the Dr. Harry's video? I left the link down yesterday about life after death. If you look at it, it's weird. It's out there, but I kind of get where he was coming from, i.e. you're kind of connected by static in some way. I'll leave that one there hanging for your delectation later on if you want. Check out yesterday's video. So, the most beautiful thing I ever saw. Now, before I start, I really would ask that you take your mind out of the gutter and just think what I'm trying to say here and appreciate it, please. So, back in 1983, I must have only turned about 20. I went back to Israel. My father was stationed over there. We had been there in the 60s, but I was only a kid at the time. So I went up, back again, full of hormones, and my life spread before me. And I was up in the mountains one day, or the hills, and I think it was the Church of Beatitudes, where our Lord gave his ceremony on the Mount. And I think it was that church, the Church of Beatitudes. So if you picture the beautiful sunshine you get out that side of the Middle Eastern world, the sand kind of everywhere, but and lush grass as well. But the thing is steeped in history and ancient history at that, the whole location. And I walked through into the church. I can't remember the name exactly, but up near the altar. I know there's a word for it, like septical or... Anyway. I qualify it by saying, of course, the most beautiful things I've seen, you know, the birth of our children and all that stuff. But I'm just, as I'm saying, artistically, aesthetically. So what am I talking about? She must have been roughly my own age, perhaps a couple of years older. And she was blonde, kind of highlighty blonde. I would say of Scandinavian extraction, probably Danish or Swedish, Norwegian. And she was on all fours in the sheerest of pink dresses. You know, that ethereal kind of material. And I could see the beautiful shape of her limbs, and her breasts swayed slowly back and forth, and she was very focused on what she was doing. As I said, get your mind out of the gutter, because this was an encounter with beauty. What she was doing was she was brass rubbing. She was at a headstone, you know, or those ones that are into the ground. Some kind of a historical, pictorial brass plate. And she was brass rubbing. And as she was at her work, she just looked like a gift from God. A snapshot of beauty, femininity, humanity, youth, all wrapped up in this beautiful Nordic skin and sheer dress. And you could see her limbs. She didn't have a slip on. I was very observant at that age about such matters. You could see her limbs, and right in front of her, the rays of the sun were coming through the stained glass window, in all their beautiful pastel colours. And the beams were coming down and catching her in mesmeric, many glow points. You know, like sometimes when you see a dust in the haze or in direct light, but this was the glow points from the glass, all about her, shimmering on her dress, not as garish as a glitter ball, but there, as if heaven sent. She'll never know I watched her. Yeah, perhaps there was a bit of lust there as well. But it was striking. It was striking in its beauty, this image, this young lady, possibly an apprentice archaeologist or a college student of archaeology. That's the vibe I got when I wasn't just thinking about this apparition of everything all come together in everything good and beautiful life has to offer. And sometimes when I'm down or depressed, just sometimes, I think of her. And I thank God, because it was heaven sent, that I witnessed the culmination of all that is beauty and perfection. And as I said, youth and femininity and grace and intelligence and the hue of her beautiful skin, the sheerness of her garb, the length of her limbs, and the fullness of her breasts. Make of that what you will. Now, dyslexia. Well, I have it, I believe. It's never been officially diagnosed, but personally it's a kind of, I call it a selective dyslexia. And I'll explain to you why I suspect as much. Well, not that there's a relationship, but I'm left-handed as well, and I'm kind of upside down left-handed, I'm told, which is very Leonardo da Vinci-esque. What can I say? I'm a Renaissance Manning. Get it? So, I'm asking everyone to, oh, by the way, fucking contact me, will you, on the email? Nobody has. This is the email address. thismuchistrue@protonmail.com. If you do, I will ring my ding-a-ling for you. Or you can say hello under the comments below. In the comments below. So why have I self-diagnosed dyslexia? Well, a couple of things have happened in my life. I noticed with certain words, I will misspell them even though I know how to spell them. Like corporate is a word I sometimes type into email, and if I don't concentrate, I spell it corporate or something like that. There's always an O-A-R. And I'll do that over and over again, and there has been other instances of similar, be it words or even phrases. But if I concentrate and I'm aware and not distracted, I'll get it bullseye, bang on, no problem. And I also had a habit of sometimes turning the last two letters around, or numbers. And the best example of that was my late boss, Malcolm, who was a kind of Scottish guy, very dour, but he'd become more Irish than the Irish themselves. He'd moved here many years ago. And we worked in a computer company together. So the drill was, as a sales guy, I would get orders. And back then, I didn't even input them on a PC, despite selling, like IT. There was a form, and you'd fill in the serial numbers of each, say, laptop. And he buzzed me one day. He was up above me. "Young Mark," he said, "come up here." So I said, "Fair enough, Malcolm." And I arrived up 2 seconds later. And he said to me, "Are you taking the piss?" And I said, "What? What's wrong? I've just gotten you 30 frickin' laptops. What more do you want?" We could talk to each other like that. He was a kind of father-son thing. He was a lovely guy. God rest him. And he said to me, "Young Mark," he said, "you've given me 30 laptops, right? Each of them have 10 have 10 digits in the serial number. And every bloody one of them, last two numbers are back to front." Prime example. I don't know how that happens, but if I concentrate, it doesn't happen. Perhaps you have dyslexia and you say, well, it's mild, but would it explain things to you that my brain does that kind of thing? Is it to do with my eyes, or it's how I process things? If I do them too fast, not always, but stuff gets done wrong. Topic number 3 tonight. I'm not really given to swooning or being starstruck. I've encountered some people you might want to know about. I'm trying to think of them now. Online, I've spoken to a member of, no one's going to remember this, but I do, because he was a great guy, one of the Glitter Band. I'm trying to think of his name on the guitar. It's not Shepherd, he's dead. This guy, and he was a lovely guy. I got chatting to him about the old days, and he was telling me how he was ripped off of his royalties and how he had gone, after all the fame in the 80s, he'd looked to find out, what royalties he'd earned that he hadn't been in receipt of. And he was done for, he said, about £12,000 at the time. But he said, at the time, £12,000 would have bought me a new house. So he was lovely. I've also spoken with a man, I won't name him in case he doesn't want to, who produced so many of the seminal videos of the 80s. He's a lovely guy. I must get in contact with him again. And he worked with Rod Stewart and the famous Queen, quintessential best video ever, Queen Bohemian Rhapsody, and the Eurythmics as well. Interesting story about the Eurythmics. Here Comes the Rain Again. Do you remember that song? He said they filmed that. It was up somewhere in Scotland, like one of these big rocks, like the Old Man of Hoy, if you've ever heard of that. Big, jagged, kind of sheer cliffs that come, within 30 feet of the mainland. And they'd been there, Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart, and him and his crew. and they'd filmed all this footage. For here comes the rain again, falling in my memory. You know what I'm talking about. You have to be of a certain age. And they got it all back to London, the footage, that is. And they were reviewing it in the editing room. And the light the camera wasn't capable of taking the light. And it turned into this kind of just waste of a whole shoot and a whole week or so of being on location. And they knew they were going to be in trouble with the record company and the artists themselves. And suddenly a young guy came in, an apprentice, and he was the coffee boy, and he leaned across the console, editing suite, and his ass, Yankees, hit one of the faders on the desk, and it turned a lot of the footage kind of black-orange, and they went, "Oh, God, you're making it even worse." Oh, hold on. This is very abstract. This could work. And it did. It went on to be a very unique kind of video and won an award or two, I believe. He was lovely. But you probably want some bigger names. How about... I have to mention the guy out of Pilot, David Patton, I think his name is. Lovely man. Was in touch with him online one day. He's the guy who wrote, "January, sick and tired, you've been hanging on me," as well as, "Oh, oh, oh, it's magic." One of the lines came from his wife, who never been awake to see a new day or something. Never been a new day. Never been awake to see a new day. She said that to him one morning when she was looking out the window. She got up early. Never been awake. Anyway, he said, "Oh, that'll do." He used that. Lovely guy. Band called Pilot. And they were big around 1974, 75 with hits like January and Magic. They were the big ones. They also had another one, same kind of beat, Just a Smile. Just a smile, just a lonely smile. I'm showing my age here. Bill Gates, how about that? There you go. Let's take it right up into the stratosphere. Well, when I was in computers, I managed to get into the Microsoft account, and hugely fulfilling it was for both parties, as well as lucrative. And for the launch of Windows 95, Bill Gates was in town, in Dublin. And the week prior, in the States, he was demonstrating the plug-and-play aspects of Windows 95. Kermit the Frog. He was demonstrating it in front of a group of people in the States, a big, big audience. And the Compaq machine had fucked up. Sorry, boys and girls. Hey. Yeah, it had screwed up. And Bill was left kind of embarrassed and swore that he'd never let it happen to him again. When he wasn't thinking about and taking over the world. Which he did, yeah, kind of, when you think about it. So, my job was to get his team a laptop that certainly wasn't going to fail on the day. So I provided him with a top-of-the-range Toshiba Satellite Pro, I think it was. Could have been a Tecra. And, yeah, I think it was a Tecra. And I sat with my wife-to-be, who was also in IT. We'd only met each other in the RDS, I think, the Royal Dublin Society. And Bill demonstrated the plug-and-play aspects perfectly, and nothing malfunctioned. There were no anomalies. So that was Bill, but I got a bit closer to him because he wasn't going to get his hands dirty with the likes of me. I dealt with his team. But the next day I flew out to London, and there he was, with his Melanie, his then wife, his ex-wife, and she was asleep on his lap, and he had a kind of donkey jacket, and this was in economy. Well, it was business, might have been business class, but sure, there's no difference. So, a curtain between the two, the fuselage and the rest of it. Anyway, I didn't see any bodyguards. They must have been there, but I didn't see any. And indeed, before the plane took off in the terminal, he'd slumped down against a wall, just like a student would do, and his legs akimbo, and he did this amazing yawn. And I thought, Christ, if I had a camera, that would be front page everywhere, you know? Because there was an iconic one of him taken like this on the paper. The next day, it was kind of, he had the spectacles. But that yawn was something else. So that was Bill Gates. In 1992, I worked for a station. It was kind of voluntary station, so it was called Anna Livia. It's the forerunner of Dublin Community Radio, I think now. And I helped, because I loved radio so much, it was great. And we were in Grafton Street, which, if any of you know, Grafton Street is probably the most expensive square footage for a shopping area in Europe. It's very hard to believe that. But it's just a throng of people day and night going up and down, and these days stabbing each other, you know. But it was Grafton Street, so it was literally a hub and a hive of activity. And we'd be upstairs in this top room of a building over a shop, I think, called Bus Stop. And I was involved in a news program. And one day, it was around Christmas time, we decided we'd go down into the shopping area and see if we could see any celebrities or anybody that would say, Happy Christmas to everybody, to all your listeners in Anna Livia. That's all we wanted. And it's known as a Vox Pop. Can I show you this little piece of kit? This is the standard now. It's called Zoom. And that can record for radio shows. There's twin mics in it. See the two little mics? You can't read. 1, 2. So. And it's got a little data card in it. Yeah, I've got some nice gimmicks here. Or should I say gadgets. That is a Canon G7X. Yeah, that's kind of standard blogger fare. It's fantastic image, pin sharp, but the mic on it is rinky dink. So, you know, I have to go, if I'm making a video, do I want video or do I want audio? And there the twain shall meet, because you cannot connect one of these. The camera we're using here is an Avermedia. It's probably the best webcam. Seriously, it is. See that? No, can't really see behind me, but it's very, very good. We went down to the street. Sorry, I digress there. And who did we spot but Bono? He's small enough as it is, but he had a little pair of Cuban heels on him. So one of the guys went over and they said, Excuse me, Bono, just a few words. Could you wish our listeners at Anna Livia Radio a happy Christmas? And Bono was too busy doing his shopping. And he said, I don't know how Bono talks really, but no, I don't do that kind of thing. So that was him gone. So we went, fuck, Bono's turned us down. Bono's pulled out. And across the way, now, I'm going to lose quite a lot of you, but if you're Irish, or particularly a Dubliner, who was looking in the window of Switzer's shop, Switzer's department store, but Ronnie Drew. Now, Ronnie Drew was one of the founders and probably one of the main singers of the Dubliners, who had lots of hits, and indeed stateside, back in the 60s. But very traditional, like no messing and drink your Guinness and let's sing about the rebels and whatever it was. But he had his great gravity old Dubliner voice for more years than I care to remember. Old Mr. Brennan. That kind of voice, which does rip your throat out. So I went over to him with my little microphone and I said, Sorry, you don't know who I am, but everybody knows who you are, which is a good line, by the way. And he said to me, What are you looking for? What's that yoke? I said, It's microphone. Could I say what? Could you say a happy Christmas to all the listeners of Anna Livia Radio from Ronnie Drew and the Dubliners? Yeah, no problem at all. Happy Christmas. Haggy Christmas to all the listeners of, what is it? Anna Livia from Ronnie Drew and all the Dubliners. Much nicer experience altogether than the rarefied atmosphere of Bono and U2. And who else can I tell you about that you may or may not know? I know there's somebody else, but I'm darned if I can remember. So you can tell I'm short of material tonight. Actually, I'm wearing the same T-shirt as I was last night. That is how busy I've been. I've got 2 new audiobooks to start. For those of you that don't know, my main line of work is voiceover and audiobooks and radio commercials. And one, if you look at Sky News at the moment in Ireland, Very Sure Alarms, $19.90 per month, plus a free video camera. That's me. I do that. Yeah. Have you any stories you'd like to share? You're saying you're wasting your time talking to yourself. There's tumbleweed blowing behind you. I get it. But I signed up for 90 days. There's a chance I may not make tomorrow night because I'm at a conference thing. But I'm going to do my best to do it because it's a discipline. Yeah, it's a discipline. There's a book here, which before Christmas I read every night for all 30 chapters of whatever it was. That's on camera. It got I think 2 people bothered to even respond to what I was doing. But it's that's its original cover from 1945. It's literally published as the war was ending. And it's, well, ideas have legs. You'd be surprised the themes in it are still relevant to a lot of what's going on in our society today. The clashing of ideas and... Anyway, you don't want to know, do you? Nah. Comments below or, surprise me, thismuchistrue@protonmail.com.